Why can't I hear anything? Oh, I'm not muted.
It looks to me like everybody's audio is working except for the Chambers audio. So if Chambers is trying to talk to us, I see their audio as not connecting yet. I don't know if others see that too.
Our audio works.
You should be able to hear us.
Yep, I can hear you now. I couldn't before.
Awesome. I just wanted to check to see if Councillor Van Host is on the line. He is.
Yes.
Okay, under
got that in.
TSL Canada. Okay. We're gonna rename you so that we make sure we have.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Well, I can deal with that. I thought I'd signed into a different account. There we go. Thanks.
All right, thank you for your patience. It is now 12:03, so I'll call the meeting to order. The 9th meeting of the Corporate Service Committee, and the City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for council, standing or advisory committee meetings, and information upon request. To make a request for any city service, please contact accessibility@london.ca or 519-661-2489, extension 2425. And to make a specific request for this meeting, please contact csc@london.ca. I'll look for any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, I'll see if committee is willing to start with our scheduled items, which is 3.1, the 2020 Debentures Issuance Report. If there's no objection, we will go to that. Thank you. So we'll go to scheduled items, item 3.1. I'll put it on the floor and I'll call to Mrs. Barbone to introduce the David Berner. Mrs. Barbone?
Yes, thank you. Through the chair. So the City of London did go out for our debenture issuance, and I'm pleased to say that we were successful in fully selling the debenture issuance. So this is really, really great news for the City of London. So we have them from National Bank attending on the line. If you do have any questions, I believe they're going to would like to walk through the brief presentation just to give you a bit of an overview if the council or the committee wishes to do so, and just kind of walk you through the challenges we had and how this went. But I'm pleased overall that we were able to sell the full issuance, which will significantly assist us with our cash flows. So if the committee just wishes to hear him walk through the brief presentation, he can do so right now.
Yes, please.
And I just wanted to, sorry, I just wanted to mention that it's included in the added. And if David Berner has a video, if he could go on video, that'd be awesome.
No, I beg your pardon. I do not have video. Sorry.
That's okay. We'll carry on.
Do you wish me to proceed now?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Well, first of all, to all members of the Corporate Service Committee, to all members of Council, and certainly to City staff, we at National Bank Financial would like to thank you ever so much for the confidence you place in our firm, and specifically my team, which is the government finance team. We're very proud to have played a senior role in this financing for you. And more importantly, congratulations on securing a very successful piece of financing, especially during what has been unarguably the most challenging markets that I think I've experienced in the last 3 decades in which I've been doing municipal finance. Without further ado, and in the interest of brevity, I'll just move right ahead with the presentation that you have in front of you. And slide 2 is where we delve into the meat of the matter. I think first, let's just maybe have a very high-level run through of the essential details. It was May 13th when we priced the deal finally. It will settle and the funds will be transferred to the city on June 5th. The size of your deal, of course, was $36 million. It was 10-year. The proper name is a 10-year installment. We would probably refer to it, and you'd be more familiar with a 10-year serial bond. The coupons on those bonds will range anywhere from 0.8% in the first year to 1.85% in the 10th year. Most importantly, of course, is the all-in cost of borrowing, which where you've secured 1.673%. That's really quite phenomenal, trust me. Maybe if we just now wade through a couple of the highlights. First of all, your financing, your deal was only the second serial bond that was successfully transacted in 2020 of an Ontario municipality. Really, despite some of the recent volatility that we've seen in these markets, this deal was, as I had mentioned, highly successful. Oh, just let me back up to the other deal. The only other deal was Regional Waterloo, about 1/3 your size. In any event, you were able to secure this financing and lock up your cost of borrowing in what has been a prevailing low interest rate market, and that's provided you with an extremely attractive cost of borrowing. Actually, all our records would indicate it's your all-time low. Really, the saving grace of this whole deal was the city's patience and flexibility, and trust me, we sincerely appreciated that. You had your documents in place to go much earlier, like in March and April. The market was not receptive to serial bonds. It could not have been executed at that time. With your documents in place and just standing back and waiting for the ideal opportunity, you were able to, let's say, strike while the iron was hot, and as such, achieved an excellent deal. Relative to your last deal, it was about 98 basis points. That's almost 1 full percentile point lower than your last serial deal. And the two pie charts at the bottom, that's just an indication of the distribution, both by geography and by investor type. That was a very robust distribution picture there. You can see you've had MP, that's Manitoba, the Ontario, Saskatchewan, US, and BC. So you pretty much you covered a good chunk of North America with that. Moving to slide 3, I'm just throwing that in there for no other reason but to show you historically where you executed this financing. This is where a 10-year Government of Canada bond yield has been since 2010. And as you can see, when I printed this up, it was the 10-year Government of Canada bond was yielding investors spot 5.95%. In fact, when we priced your deal, it was even more attractive at 0.55%. So, relative to the last 120 months, that's a fine piece of financing. And again, congratulations. And it was done, I think, really, it was just your ability to be patient and just wait for the opportunity to present itself, and then you proceeded, and that's a winning combination right there. Slide 4, you know what? I don't really think we have to delve into. That was just essentially included for your perusal at your leisure. Just kind of covers the trends that we've been seeing since the beginning of the year, and it's a very general overview. So I think what I'll do at this point then is turn it back to the chair or Mrs. Barbon, and is there any questions you may have of me?
Thank you, Mr. Berner. I'll look to committee to see if there are any questions or comments. Mr. Mayor?
Thanks very much, Chair, and through you to our guests. Thank you for the information here. I think it's pretty thorough. A couple of questions. To what extent does our AAA rating as a city help in terms of the issuance of bonds such as these?
That's actually an excellent question, because had you asked that question, let's go back 12 or 24 months ago, I would have said the difference between a AA rating and a AAA rating could have been as tight as 5 basis points. Right now, it's at least 10, maybe even 12 basis points. So in other words, well, actually, you know what? There's not even a double A that could have been executed at this time. But let's just go with that 12 basis points. So your all-in cost, hypothetically, if you were double A, typically could have been about 1.79 as opposed to 1.67.
So as a follow-up to that, Chair, are you suggesting that there may well be municipalities that will not be able to get debenture funding as a result of their status?
As a result of their rating, actually, I was. No, I think you could see like double A's would be like Niagara or Guelph. I think at this juncture now the market has sufficient footing to accept a serial issued by a double A rated Ontario-based municipality at a higher cost of borrowing than what you would have secured. When Mr. Mayor, probably when I made the answer to your question, when I was saying a double A could not have got out, quite frankly, a triple A wasn't getting into the market either. So the market has thawed to the point that's allowed municipal serial bonds to enter into the market. And but there is now a difference between a double A rated municipality and a triple A rated. I speculate it's 12 basis points right now.
All right. My separate question is more of a future question. So I'm looking at the macro trends that slide that you had there, and I read that with some interest. I'm trying to anticipate going forward what the I read your notes about some of the tensions internationally with two major players relative to Canada, both the United States and China. The oil industry is by no means recovering, but you indicated some hopeful signs. We'll see. But what I'm more concerned about is at the local levels of cities across Canada and the world. I think economically there are some real serious challenges with business failures will be unprecedented as a result of this. And so I'm asking the question, if as we go to the market in future, I don't want, I'll ask you to shine your crystal ball. Do you see those economic trends as a result of, like I truly worry about economic recession, and you might have an opinion on that, but to the extent that it has impacts on our ability to go to the markets next year, say, any prognostications around that?
I don't, Mr. Mayor, through your chair, to Mr. Mayor, I do not. How am I going to word this? I don't see the market freezing out the municipal sector. In other words, not being accessible unless we revert back to what we saw in April and March. If we did, or March and April rather, if we get back to that kind of environment where investors are so terrified that they will buy Government of Canada, U.S. Treasuries, German bonds, UK sterling. In other words, only federal debt, and not even entertain looking at other sectors, i.e., provincials or municipals. Then all bets are off. If we revert back to that mindset, we did. Don't forget, before we got into that, we had a lot of U.S.-China pressures and the market was still accepting the second tier and third tier government debt and that. What will affect it is your cost of borrowing is comprised of three levels. You take the Government of Canada bond, then you add to that how much a province is commanding over that. We'll call that the provincial spread. And then you add to that how much is the spread for London over top of the province of Ontario. So that's the third. Really, the driving factor is where are those Government of Canada yields going to be? they can comprise anywhere up to 75% of your all-in cost of borrowing. If they drop dramatically, then your cost will also probably improve, like we saw here. It was a very challenging market, and but yet you still secured an extremely attractive cost of borrowing. Relative to Ontario, you're probably wider than you have been in many years, but the fact is your all-in cost improved because despite your spread relative to Ontario and despite Ontario's spread relative to Canada being wider, the improved yield on Canada's more than offset any widening spread. I guess what I'm saying is, what you lost on the apples, you more than made up for on the oranges. So
my final comment, Chair, is actually Ms. Barbone and her team. They're the ones I really want to also acknowledge for the work that they put in to make this happen. And a sincere thanks. That's it for me.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from committee? Councillor Morgan?
Yes, and thank you for the presentation. I appreciate it. And also I'll echo the mayor's words and thank our staff as well for their support on a successful issue. My interest lies in how much interest there was in our offering. I suspect if there are federal and provincial programs that require municipal contributions, they're likely capital, and we may need to go to debt markets in the future. So I'm curious on how you see the interest in municipal debt trending and what the interest was in our particular offering.
Two-part, through Madam Chair. Councillor, there's that's kind of a two-part question, actually. The appetite for municipal bonds has improved since May the 1st. They were virtually non-existent prior to that. From the end of February to May the 1st, it was almost impossible to get the municipal bonds in. Now that has found some footing, the appetite remains far more robust for a bullet issue. That's like what I mean by a bullet issue, just one single maturity. And I'll just use the City of Toronto on May the 1st issued $200 million of a November 9, 2029 bond. That's one maturity. They just pay interest up to the maturity, then they pay it all off in the end. Your serial issue is a series of 10 separate bonds. So it's 10 smaller bonds. Right now, the investors are still sharply focusing on the liquidity. So a $200 million bond offers far more liquidity, and we'll find far more traders out there willing to buy or sell that bond if an investor wants to liquidate his holding than a series of $3 million tranches, 10 $3 million tranches, in your case, 3.6 million in that. So serials are finding it a little bit more challenging. Who has been one of the greatest supporters over the decades of municipal serials has been other municipalities. And you guys can certainly attest to the fact that a lot of municipalities are pulling in their horns a little bit, and they're sitting on their cash, so they're not investing as broadly in other municipalities. Some of them are. Don't kid yourself. Some of them are. And that government sector there in that pie chart, they were two different municipalities, but with a vastly greater number of municipalities not participating in the investment market right now, serials have become a challenge, and it took a few phone calls, I don't mind telling you, to get the deal placed in its entirety, but it wasn't impossible. Trust me. I mean, London is, there's a scarcity factor with London. You only come once a year. They're not overly large issues. And if anybody needs that name to diversify their portfolio, they're only going to get one shot a year at it. So that helped. Your AAA credit rating helped. And the fact that there just has not been a lot of municipal supply out there at this time. has helped, again, back to the scarcity factor. So while it did take a little longer to get over the goal line than you might have been accustomed to in the past, it nonetheless succeeded in getting over the goal line, and we were able to sell all 10. It's just a bit more of a challenge this time, that's all.
Thank you. So those are all the questions I had. I just want to make a couple of final comments on the issuance. First off, I do think a very successful issuance. Again, congratulations to both you as well as our staff on getting it done. I will emphasize, as I often do at this time, this is a big deal given where the markets were, that we were able to issue this debt and issue it at a rate that is our best that I've seen since my time on council. And as the mayor asked, this is a testament to our AAA credit rating, which is based on a couple of things, including our long-term financial plan, which has been well executed by both staff and successive councils over a number of years. It's also a function of our multi-year budget and the way that we plan over a multi-year time horizon. All of these things support this type of result, which is very, very positive for London, for us to be able to access the debt to complete the projects we need to complete at a rate that is pretty incredible for London taxpayers over the years to come. So again, congratulations, not just to those presenting today, but also to the long-term adherence to our financial plan to get us to this point.
Are there any other comments? Deputy Mayor Helmer.
Thank you. Through the chair, I wonder if Ms. Barbone or her team could try and put the all-in borrowing cost in perspective. So this is obviously a great rate, which has been observed by a number of commentators, the mayor and Councillor Morgan already. In terms of the amount of money that we're borrowing and the term of that debenture, how much money are we saving? Let's use, say, last year as an example, the kind of borrowing costs that we saw last year compared to what we're seeing this year. How much money is it going to save us over the course of these debentures?
Mrs. Barbone.
Thank you, through the chair. So in terms of the historical rate, the last time we saw a rate that the lowest rate we would have seen probably since 2010 is 1.87% that we had in 2015. That's been the lowest rate right since 2010. So this is quite significant in terms of the differences. What I can tell you is from a budget perspective, it is certainly lower than what we had anticipated. And there will be some savings. However, at the same time, our interest rates that we're getting on our investments are significantly below what we had budgeted. So any surplus we'll have in the one line will be offset by the decrease in the investments. So I believe that we've got, if we look at the whole course of the 10-year issuance, it's about a $2 million savings. Mr. Murray can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's about $2 million over the 10 years that we're saving based on what we would have issued in the past.
Thanks, and through the chair, Ms. Barbone is absolutely correct. Last year's rate of issuance was 2.655%. Comparing that to this year's issuance rate of 1.67%, that is a savings of a little over $2 million of interest over the 10-year term of the debenture.
Thank you very much, and I certainly understand the pressure on other areas in the budget, but this particular issuance is certainly helping us, and I just wanted to reiterate what Councillor Morgan and the mayor had said. This is really helpful in a time when we really need it, and I'm glad that you had the flexibility to wait until the market conditions were very favorable. Great work by everybody involved.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions? Okay, so I'll look for a mover and a seconder. Councillor Morgan, seconded by Mayor Holder. I will call to question. So, Councillor Van Hulst?
Yes.
Councillor Helmer?
Yes.
Councillor Morgan,
Yes.
Councillor Hopkins.
Yay.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay. And Mayor Holder?
Yes.
And I vote yes.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 6-0.
Thank you. So we'll go back to our consent items, and is there anybody who wants to pull an item off of the consent agenda? We can move it all together. Okay, seeing none, so I'll put the whole entire consent agenda on the floor. I'll need a mover and a seconder, and it will take comments or questions. Councillor Hopkins, moved by Councillor Hopkins, seconded by, I'll second it. And comments or questions. Councillor Morgan.
Yeah, my question is about the amendments to the property tax bylaws for the 2020 final tax billing. In the report, it references the motion we made, and part of that motion was on the pre-authorized payment portion. I would say this is an area where I have had some questions from constituents who I've referred to our staff, and they've answered them quite effectively. But there is some question about what is happening with pre-authorized payments for those who are on them. Obviously, the motion we made was very clear. What are we doing to communicate to those on pre-authorized payments how this process is working now for them, so that they're well aware of when those payments will come out?
On the notification, we put information on the website as to what is happening, and we've also put information on the phone system when people call the tax office. And when we do send out the notices, which we plan to send out in July, end of July, we will have all the details of the due dates and that kind of information on the notices when they go out.
Thank you, Mr. Logan. So that's helpful to know that we're taking a multi-pronged approach. I think with this, certainly the change was welcome, but sometimes people don't know exactly what the change is that we made and how it will impact them. So it sounds to me like there will be multiple points where they'll get contacted before that first pre-authorized payment under the kind of the new schedule in August. I'm sure people will notice the ones that shifted away as well, and I think that's what generated the questions. So I'm satisfied with the answer, and I appreciate the work that you're doing on this.
Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is on 2.1, which is the single source corporate technology assets. Understand we're entering or extending our agreement to 18 months. The province has extended us to move forward to November 21st. Kind of curious to know how much we are saving by entering this agreement. I don't need to know solid facts, but is there some kind of an idea that you can, through you to staff, that you can give us an idea by entering this agreement, going through this program, how much we are saving as a city?
Mr. Daly?
Yes, thank you, and through the chair. When we look at the mix of technology assets that will be covered under this VOR, and we compare that cost to list cost, it's approximately 23% on average for the mix of technology that we will be obtaining through the provincial VOR. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from committee? Mayor Holder. Mayor Holder, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Thank you. On the procurement in emergencies relating to COVID-19, this is a pandemic that is going to be with us for who knows when. I'm trying to understand what the parameters will be at the end of it. Like, how do we define the end as it relates to, will it be when the Premier says, it's over? Will it be because we've got 0 cases 10 days in a row? Will it be, I'm trying to get a feel because there's a lot of talk about this extending a year, 18 months. What about a second wave? So I wonder through you, Chair, if I could get some understanding of the definition of end date, please.
We'll go to perhaps Mrs. Livingston.
Ms. Barbone was going to speak to it because the policy will define what sets the period of time. I believe it's tied to the declaration, but I'll ask Ms. Barbone to speak to it.
Thank you, Mrs. Barbone.
Yes, thank you through the chair. So based on the procurement policy, there is a definition with respect to emergency. So it is specifically tied to a number of items where, and it's specifically defined on the first page of your report, where there's an occurrence that talks to an immediate threat to public health, maintenance of essential city operations, and or immediate need to mitigate the emergency where we can't have a competitive bid. So primarily what this does is this allows us, and I believe this question was asked of us earlier when we spoke to the impacts, is that does our procurement policy allow us to procure? And really this speaks to the non-competitive nature where we do not have the time to go out and follow through our specific procurement policy where we would have greater than 50,000 a public tender and all of those other things. This is specific need that we are trying to address. So in our mind, the end right now could be any of the provincial and or the local emergencies where they are ended. We could potentially see where we deem that the end of the procurement from the perspective of the procurement is done, but that we might see it start up again. So really what it does is it comes down specifically is that, you know, the managing director has the authority under the procurement policy to implement this specific part of it. And then we would clarify when the end is there. So I would suggest at this point, going forward, this will continue and we would clarify specifically when we have deemed the end of it to be. And through that process, rather than wait till the very end, which is the way the procurement policy was written, given that there is an extended period of time, normally where we've utilized this provision, it's been a very, very small period of time. This is because it's excessively long and we don't know exactly when the end of it's going to be. We've chosen to report on a regular basis just to be transparent and to ensure that council knows. Most of these costs were included in the projected financial impact that we had put forward in the earlier report that we provided.
So Chair, I certainly understand and support the rationale for doing it. And I think that explanation certainly also was clear in the report that was provided to us. What I was looking for, and I think the city manager dealt with it, and I was going to hear a confirmation, but it sounds like be it the provincial or the local emergency declaration will be the ultimate point at which the change from single source financing or single source procurement, that will be the point at which it will formally change back to I'll say the traditional or the regular method. And I just wanted to confirm or hear that it was likely a removal of the provincial or local emergency declaration.
Through the chair, this is Annalisa, I would confirm that that is correct, although we could choose under the procurement policy to end it sooner if we didn't see a need to invoke that provision any further.
Thank you for that. And Chair, I have one other question relating to the 25-year club cancellation. Understood, and I'm sure it will be ultimately supported by everyone. As we know, a number of events have been postponed or ultimately canceled for this year. My question through you, Chair, is do we have some form of acknowledgement of our 25-year club honorees, certificate, gold watch? Not sure. Is that we'll be able to send to them, or is that just going to be determined at a future for a future event?
And we'll go to Mrs. Livingston for that.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. This is a reunion event, so these are folks that have been recognized already in the past for their 25-year commitment to public service. So this is a reunion event that occurs every year. So, of course, in our cancellation, we will be conveying our apologies for having to cancel it, but recognizing their contribution over the many years.
Thank you, Ms. Leeson. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I wasn't sure if I saw Deputy Mayor Helmer put his hand up or not. No? Okay. All right. Any other comments or questions from committee? Seeing none, we'll call to question. Okay. Councillor Van Hulst.
Yes.
Councillor Deputy Mayor Helmer.
Yes.
Councillor Morgan.
Yes.
Councillor Hopkins.
Yes.
Mayor Holder. You're muted, Mayor Holder.
Apologies, yes.
And I vote yes.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 6-0.
Thank you. So now we'll go to our items for direction, and it is a letter from Mr. McCartney, CEO of the London Chambers of Commerce. And I will put this on the floor. I'll go to Mrs. Barbone first to answer some of the questions and concerns that were identified in this letter, and then we'll go to comments or questions from committee. Or we can take comments or questions from committee first, and then we'll go to Mrs. Barbone. Actually, let's do it that way. Any comments or questions from committee? Mayor Holder.
Thanks very much. I think the CEO of the London Chamber speaks with some experience and authority on this issue. I think we all share his concern about businesses that will not survive. I'm not even saying anymore may not survive, but will not survive the pandemic experience. And then there will be those who will take a significant amount of time to get to a point where they are more viable. So I think his we'll take the positive from him that we have worked as a council, and when we have reduced or we have made impacts on the residential rate, those people being employees. But I'm mindful of his comment of the impact because of the commercial property tax increase. Regardless of how anyone voted on this, ultimately it's a policy of council now, and it's determined. But I'm not sure what he's asked for a response, but perhaps if there is going to be a staff response to us in terms of our questions or comments, I would wonder what an appropriate response would be. The fact that we've already put this in place, by the way, I will tell you, from the standpoint of the business education tax, which he lauds our efforts, I will share with committee that I had a very extensive discussion with the Finance Minister of Ontario last week on this very specific issue, and as a result, forwarded to the Finance Minister the documents that we have, where we have the highest rates of business education tax. And it struck me that as I spoke with him, that he said I was the first mayor to bring this forward to him. And that, should we be surprised? I don't know. But we did talk about equalization, which means perhaps the lowest rates go up a little bit and we go down significantly, or whether we go down to that lower level. I can't tell you at this point, but we have had discussions, and I can certainly respond to the CEO of the Chamber of the very specific discussions to the extent that I can share them, that they are being considered. But in a world where COVID seems to be the priority of the day, and their actions are primarily consumed in that vein. So I wanted to share with committee what I had done with the provincial finance minister, but at the same time, I think that can have a tremendously positive impact. I just don't see that decision being made quickly. So I wanted to share that with you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Barbone can.
Thank you through the chair. So certainly we can provide a response to support the letter that was written. I think the most important part that I would point out, however, is that council, when they set the tax policy, only sets it for the year 2020. It has not been set into the future. So the rate that has been established is only for this year at the 5.2%. And I would add specifically, I think a very important item is that with the MPAC reassessment being deferred from next year, what you will see is that there will be no valuation changes. So that will very much change potentially what it will look like for next year to bring, because I think a number of the increases have been driven specifically with the increases in valuation. So I think you'll see quite a different picture next year, but at this point, we certainly don't have that information yet based on when MPAC will be looking to implement those changes in final from them yet.
Councillor Morgan, and then we'll Councillor Hopkins after.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm going to do my best to be respectful on this. We'll see how it goes. So there's a lot of problems with this letter. And this is the third letter in a row that has been written by the Chamber that has had significant factual inaccuracies in it. One just mentioned by the Treasurer. First, an understanding of the decision that we actually made on the tax ratios is pretty important. We were faced with, because of the MPAC valuation system, a business tax of higher than this amount. I believe it was 5.4%. And what council did was make two pro-business decisions. One, to adjust the tax ratios between residential and the corporate tax ratio to lower that burden. And the only thing we discussed was whether we would lower it to 5.2 or whether we would lower it to 4.9. Neither of which I think, Mr. McCartney would be satisfied with. But that was the discussion that we had and the vote that we took. It was a positive move to adjust the ratios to try to offset some of the pressure caused by the MPAC value assessment system on London businesses. So this 5.2% was an improvement from the status quo. It was lowered through actions that council took. So that seems to be that thought seems to be absent in this particular letter. The idea that and the other point that I will reemphasize is, as Ms. Barbone just said, this is not a multi-year thing. This is the third time I've heard someone say this, and I do not know where it is coming from, but we set the tax ratios every year. And as Ms. Barbone said, the MPAC valuations are going to be frozen next year. And so you will not see this unfair potentially shift between tax classes or even individuals within a particular tax class next year. It'll be interesting to see the year after how people feel about it when it goes back to the system that tends to distribute the tax burden unevenly across classes. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there a couple of years from now. Then, because we didn't have control over this, the only thing we could have done was potentially passed a lower budget. And I think it is unclear that there is an understanding that the tax ratios are not related to the budget discussion. We passed a budget, and then the MPAC value assessments decided how that budget was going to be paid across the different tax classes. So this question about why did council not consider lowering the property taxes in lieu of what is happening in the economy, that is not the decision we were making. The decision we had was, are we going to help businesses out by shifting the tax ratios a little bit? Because we all, and what council ultimately decided was, yeah, we agree that we should help that out. We should shift a little bit of this burden a little more evenly across the tax classes and make that decision. But this idea that we were passing or adjusting the budget at that point is not, it doesn't seem like the chamber understood what we were actually deciding there. So let me talk about that idea for a second. Freezing property taxes or lowering them at this point we all know that we have a $57 million hole because of lost revenues and additional costs. Now we've mitigated 25 million of that. So by the end of August, we'll have a $33 million hole, but decreasing our revenue lines is only going to make that situation worse. And Ms. Barbone's next report would simply say, here's the bigger hole that you have for yourselves in 2020. So I'm not sure that there's a clear understanding about the fiscal situation that the city is in by the chamber. And I hope in any communications back, we can endeavor to support their better understanding of the position we're in, because making the suggestion that we significantly lower our revenues at a time when we have a significant fiscal hole and we can't borrow money to fix that problem would be a pretty irresponsible decision on the part of municipal council. So, you know, I hope that we can communicate back in a very respectful way some of the problems of core understanding that exists that underline this letter, and I hope that no one takes this as us not supporting London businesses, because the two actions we took on both the education tax and adjusting the tax ratios were pro-business decisions. Whether or not you thought we should go a little bit further, yeah, we had that debate and discussion, but we were talking about the difference between 5.2 and 4.9. Still a pretty high increase for businesses caused by the impact tax system. Now, the question I do want to ask Ms. Barbone at the end of my long-winded statement is, there's also this misunderstanding out there that for some reason we're still following, you know, to the T, the 2020 budgeted, the 2020 budget, 2020 component of the multi-year budget. So can you confirm that because of the state of emergency, we are basically only spending on essential operations and not following, you know, all of the things that were passed in the 2020 budget because we're under a state of emergency?
Yes, through the chair, thank you. So as we outlined in the fiscal impact report that we did a couple weeks ago, where we highlighted the $30 million, what that showed was a number of areas where we will not meet our revenue projections and where we have significant decreases in revenue that was anticipated. And as a result, we've had to find ways to decrease all of our discretionary spending and other costs to try to come in line. At that point in time, we still had a $30 million shortfall. But as we are working on right now, our next report to bring forward to update our fiscal position in June, we are looking as a senior leadership team what other options we have so that we can present that to council to show what hopefully some progress that we've made based on the decisions that have been made to date and how we would look at that. So we've certainly identified a number of ways where assessment growth would be utilized to support that shortfall, but we have reduced all discretionary spending, and we are spending only on essential services and limited service delivery. And where that surplus in those lines is still there is certainly assisting us in mitigating what those impacts are. And a number of those were highlighted specifically in the report. So as we look at where our position is going to be, we will have a further update in June and also identify if we need to make any other decisions potentially for other service level impacts that we would identify that would then be brought forward. But that's correct. We are not spending money in our lines as we normally would because we are only doing limited essential services delivery at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Barbone. So I want to emphasize, we have passed a budget. We're saving as much money as we possibly can in that budget. And irrespective of that, we still are tracking towards a fiscal deficit position. So there is not much that we can do on property taxes, particularly the spread of them because of the impact system across the whole. Our ability to impact this will be, you know, when we get the report from Ms. Barbone and her team in June to see where we are and the decisions we want to make in the fiscal update in the fall for future years of the multi-year budget. Some things we may have to push off, some things we may have to discuss, some things we may have to not do, but that debate and that time for council will happen. I just want it to be very clear, the situation we're in now, because this idea of, you know, why did we not, you know, essentially freeze property taxes, a one-time freeze, is just not reasonable or possible given, you know, the legal ramification, the legal structure that we have to operate in, and our current fiscal situation, given all of the measures we've taken to curtail spending in 2020. So I'll listen to what other colleagues' thoughts are. I appreciate you letting me be pretty frank on this letter.
I'll go to Councillor Hopkins and we'll go to Deputy Mayor Hammer after.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Councillor Morgan, for your comments. I agree with a lot of the comments that you just made. One of the things I would like to speak to is about how we are approaching this in a slow, steady way. I want to thank staff for their information that they provide us as a committee where we debate and come up with the best solutions. I know that's what I was trying to do. And when I read this letter from the Chamber, I was a little bit concerned because I don't think they had all their facts. And the most important fact I think that we can talk about right now is that this just relates to 2020. It's not the multi-year budget. And as we go through this process, I know we're going to be very, we are all concerned given everything that we have to deal with, how everything has shifted. But I think the approach that we're taking is the right approach. I'd like to just step back for a moment. When we debated this, I know it was a good debate we had at committee and another debate we had at council. And we were addressing some of the options. And I was approached by my community. I have a large farming community in my ward. And the concerns as farming agricultural land has gone up, and now we're increasing the farming ratio to what it is now. But we were comparing it to those two options, 1 and 2. And when I chose the option 2, and I know we're talking about the commercial rate here in this letter, but for me, it was what is fair for all the different areas and the percentages, and where's the big bang and the savings and the balance for everyone. And I did my due diligence to try to figure that out. And I want to thank my committee members for helping me with that conversation, and at council listening to the point of the different points. But I was a small business owner for 25 years. I know the challenges that the commercial business people have, but I do think overall, generally speaking, if we start picking and choosing items where we want to make a change in, I think we have to look at everything. The farming community is not happy with their increases that they're trying to deal with. And that's a very big part of the business in our area as well. So thank you for allowing me to just express my thoughts. I think reporting back to the chamber and really giving more of an in-depth understanding of these options and the time that we're looking at to the chamber so they can understand the difficulty that we're all having trying to do what's best for the economy and for Londoners. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll go to Deputy Mayor Helmer.
Thanks very much. A lot has been said here, and I want to first recognize that I can certainly understand where Mr. McCartney is coming from. You know, we're in a very bad economic situation, and the businesses in the community are looking for help anywhere they can get it, and they want to keep their costs under control when they're in a situation with, you know, in many cases, no revenue coming in at all. And of course, people are going to look at property tax and look for relief there. So I think it makes a lot of sense. I agree with the way that Councillor Morgan has described, unfortunately, some of the issues in the letter. And I just want to emphasize the overall direction that we have been going over the last little while. Councillor Hopkins picked up on this, and I think it actually is helpful. And so that's why I want to emphasize it, because I think the way to respond, Mr. McCartney is asking for, you know, what should I tell these business owners? I think we should just communicate to them what we have been doing. Because I think what we have been doing has been helpful. Obviously, people are not always going to agree on what to do in certain situations. People think we should do more or do less on a variety of things. But if we're just lead with the facts and be honest about what's been happening, I think people's understanding of the situation will be improved. So we started lowering the commercial tax ratio back in 2015, and we've lowered it pretty significantly since then. It used to be 1.98, now it's 1.91. It doesn't sound like a lot, but that would add up to millions of dollars in savings for business property owners in the City of London. So just that small change over time, millions of dollars a year for sure. The industrial tax ratio used to be 2.63. When I came onto council, it was around 2.22, and we've been lowering it very consistently along the same lines as the corporate one recently, but there was a very significant increase in the first year in 2015 where it dropped down. So down from 2.22 also to 1.91. That is saving, again, millions of dollars, and that is on a smaller tax base. So the industrial tax base is much, much smaller than the commercial, but it would still be saving something like $2 million a year. $2 million a year, every year, that change. And it was saving that much money last year. It's saving that much money again this year for those industrial property taxpayers. Similarly, on the farm issue, which Councillor Hopkins brought up, we have lowered that. It used to be around 0.25. It's the lowest of all the tax ratios. Now it's around 10.1. So it's half of what it used to be. It's gone down the most of anything. And, that is because we have been mitigating what Councillor Morgan was talking about, which is these humongous increases, especially in the farm sector, in valuations over the past few years. So, we can't do everything with tax policy, but what we can do, we have been doing. And I think we've been mitigating some of the biggest problems in terms of rapidly changing costs for property taxpayers of different kinds. So that is not an easy thing to do. It always comes at the expense of the other property classes. And so that's why there are constraints. How quickly can we move? How fast can we make these changes? When we made the big industrial change, I didn't support it, partly because I thought it was too much too soon. We decided to go ahead. So I think that's what we should probably communicate back to the chamber, is not just what happened this year, but what we have been doing over the longer term and the magnitude of the change around education tax policy, because that is the biggest opportunity that is in front of us. That is the thing, as the mayor mentioned, that the province can do that's going to help support business recovery, specifically here in London. It would lower business taxes probably by 7%, if they took the whole thing all at once. That would save us, that would save the business community in London a lot of money on property taxes at a time when they could really use it. So I think being joined at the hip in terms of advocating to the province on that issue would be very helpful. And I'm glad to see that Mr. McCartney is suggesting that he will continue to advocate for that. And I know he has in the past, because I think that's the thing that will really help. And then if we can just be clear about what we have done over the past few years, really it's been going back till 2015 to lower this issue and to mitigate those assessment related increases. I think that will be very helpful overall, because I get it. It's coming from a place where they want to control costs. They want to look for things that can be done. They want council to do those things. And I think if we indicate we have been trying to mitigate this problem, I think that will go over well. The truth is on our side here.
Thank you. So I'll look for we're going to receive the letter. Councillor Hopkins. Councillor Hopkins? Are you moving to receive the letter? Okay.
To receive the letter, and I do have a question. Who will be responding to the chamber? Through you, Madam Chair.
So we're going to make a motion to receive and to draft a letter. Just a second. Mayor Holder, are you seconding the motion?
Well, I'd like to respond to Councillor Hopkins' question first, if I can. You'll note that the letter was addressed to the mayor and city council, so I think it's appropriate that on behalf of city council that I respond accordingly. And I'll certainly work with Ms. Barbone has some contributions to that, but I appreciate what all the councillors said in terms of outlining details, but on behalf of council, I think it's my letter to respond to. I think that's on behalf of council.
Awesome.
And I'm happy to.
Okay, great. We'll read the motion and then we'll vote.
The motion moved by Councillor Hopkins and seconded by Mayor Holder is that the following actions be taken with respect to the communication dated May 7th, 2020 from G. McCartney, CEO, London Chamber of Commerce, regarding the City of London commercial property tax rate. A, the above noted communication be received, and B, the mayor be directed to provide information to the London Chamber of Commerce, including all applicable information and past actions taken to clarify the issues raised in the above noted communication.
Does that work for everyone? Okay, so we have a mover and seconder, and Councillor Morgan. Yes,
and I don't believe it needs to be in the letter, but I think Deputy Mayor Helmer made an excellent point about the need for our support on the advocacy on business education taxes of working, I think he said with our hips attached to each other or something, but working hand in hand with the chamber in our efforts on that. And I know the mayor has been working on that, but I know that the chamber is supportive of that. So I'm sure, that can be worked into the letter as well. I don't need to add it to the motion, but I think that that's an excellent point. We do need their support and everybody supporting that advocacy.
Awesome. So we'll call to question now. Councillor Van Hulst.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Helmer.
Yes.
Councillor Morgan.
Yes.
Councillor Hopkins.
Yes.
Mayor Holder.
Yes.
And I also vote yes.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 6-0.
We have no deferred matters list and or additional businesses, and we don't have a in closed session agenda. So I would look to committee to adjourn the meeting. Can I get a mover, seconder for adjournment? Mayor Holder, seconded by Councillor Hopkins. And just raise your hand, all in favor. And we are adjourned. Thank you for coming to committee today.
Thank you.